What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Unique Access Entertainment. As always, please hit that subscribe button. It's right down there and it's free. That enables us to keep coming to y'all as often as possible with as many interviews as possible, as many first and 15ths as possible, as many great debaters as possible, and then commentaries like these. Man, and while you're down there, please, please, please join, become a member of Unique Access if you haven't already. Now, today, man, the internet's going nuts, as Paul Wall famously said back in the day, because it is Kendrick Lamar and Drake uh, battle, quote unquote, that's going on. And shout out to my boy James Kreisberg, my friend, who suggested I do something about this, and it got me to thinking about how these rap beefs are different from ones that took place in the past and other famous ones. And I think it's a very great topic. So thank you, James. But on top of that, it's very interesting to compare and contrast this Drake Kendrick Lamar beef to some of these other ones. And I want to highlight a bunch of stuff as I go through this video. So, when you look at some of the high visibility beefs of yesteryear, you got the magnitude of the artist is very important because that's going to be a lot of what I'm discussing today. Not only the magnitude in the rap world, but where they were in the pop world. So you look at the LL Cool J, Kumo D beef, you go back to the Ice Cube and N.W.A beef. You go to the Dr. Dre and Eazy-E beef. You go to the Tupac and Biggie beef, the Nas and Jay-Z beef, and 50 Cent and Ja Rule beef. Now, the LL Cool J and Kumo D, this was going on in the mid to late 1980s, carried on into the early 90s briefly. You got the Ice Cube and N.W.A that really kicked off in 89, 90, and then lasted really, I would argue, through the Chronic per se, because Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg dissed Ice Cube a couple times on the Chronic in 92. And then you got Dr. Dre beefing with Eazy-E, which really was 91, and then lasted a couple years, and then Eazy-E passed away, unfortunately, in 1995. And you got Tupac and Biggie. And this is, to me, the first time that we had the most rappers that were the biggest at the time, but also were one of or among the driving forces of popular music, in the sense that Biggie and Tupac at their time in the mid 1990s, when their beef was really kicking off, they were two of the artists that were getting a lot of play, of course, on MTV and BET, but they were also getting a lot of play on the radio in a way that LL Cool J didn't, Kumo D didn't, Ice Cube didn't, N.W.A didn't, Eazy-E didn't, and maybe Dre started to, but that was still, to me, more of a video thing with the Chronic and then even Doggy Style, but it wasn't the magnitude that we saw that with Biggie and Tupac, to where they were just being played on massive amounts of radio stations, and their videos were in rotation, I would say, at a level that was unprecedented, partially because of their rivalry, partially because of the trouble Tupac was constantly getting into legally, and then somewhat similarly with Biggie. And then you add the fire to that flame of their rivalry. And that's, leading us up to then another huge beef that was in the early 2000s was the one with 50 Cent and Ja Rule. And the reason why all this is important, because rap at all these eras and battles and different things I'm mentioning, rap is only getting more and more popular. It's selling more units. It's on the radio more often. It's in more record stores more often. It's on video more often. It's just everything is exploding. Rappers are in films now more by the time we get to this mid 90s. And then with Ja Rule and 50 Cent, to see rappers in a movie was almost expected, if not normal, by the time we're in this early 2000s era. You have these huge global icons of the LL Cool J is a global icon. Ice-T is a global icon. Will Smith is a global icon. Queen Latifah is a global icon. Dr. Dre is a global icon. That wasn't the case with any artist in the 1980s and the early 1990s. But because of all the work the pioneers had been putting in since the 70s and the 80s, by the time we get to the 90s and the early 2000s, people like Ja Rule and 50 Cent were able to sell 4 or 5 million copies of an album, have massive radio play, in 50 Cent's instance, get your own movie, get rich or die trying, all these huge things that happened that were unprecedented essentially with many of these other beefs. Now, as we move that on to Kendrick Lamar and Drake, we also have to remember that they were collaborators turned enemies, as we saw with a lot of these beefs I had mentioned, because Kendrick appeared on Drake's Take Care album, and Drake, of course, appeared on Kendrick Lamar's Poetic Justice. So they have a history like Biggie and Pac, like Nas and Jay-Z, all these different things going on. Dr. Dre and Eazy-E, Ice Cube, N.W.A. People knew each other, had sampled each other, worked together, etc. So there was a familiarity there with Kendrick Lamar and Drake. But the main difference is Drake is a pop star and he also raps. And he's a revered rapper by a lot of people. Whether or not you like him or not is irrelevant for this discussion because a lot of people do. And I want to break some of this down to put things in comparison. All this research that I'm about to cite in these sales figures all comes from the RIAA, the Recording Industry uh, Association of America. And basically, they're the ones that track record sales. So I'm not using Wikipedia, I'm not using anything else. This is from the actual source that the record industry uses to track record sales. So Kendrick Lamar's two biggest sales figures come are both quadruple platinum. One is Swimming Pools, the single. The other one is Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe. So both of those went quadruple platinum. They were both released in 2012, and in 2018 they went quadruple platinum. So, you can do the math. 6 years ish for them to achieve that's a phenomenal, successful single, and he has two of them. Those are his highest selling things. Now, when I was looking at Drake by comparison, these are just certifications that took place in October of 2023, which is the most recent as of today when I checked on the RIAA's website. So, Nice for What is 9 times platinum. Too Good by Rihanna is 5 times platinum. Passion Fruit is, I think, 10 times platinum. Fake Love is 6 times platinum. God's Plan is 16 times platinum. In My Feelings is 8 times platinum. So these songs were released 2016, 2017, or 2018, and they had all had certifications before this October 2023 certification, which pushed them up to the levels that I mentioned. So that means they're all steadily still being consumed and they're still getting massive amounts of consumption. So Drake's material is exponentially more popular, it's exponentially more consumed, it's exponentially a higher level as far as consumption. I'm not talking quality whatsoever. I'm only talking sales and I'm only talking consumption. So back to the beef, this is to my thought really, really, really the first time that pop artist has gone against a real revered rapper because Kendrick Lamar has one or two pop songs. Drake is actually pop music. He is one of the most popular artists in music and has been for the last decade, give or take. That's never been done before because as big as Tupac or Biggie or Jay-Z or Nas or whoever you want to say from these battles, LL Cool J back in the day, they were never the best selling close to remotely in that upper tier, upper echelon of being the most popular artist in music, whereas Drake actually is. And that's a big, big, big difference for what I'm about to say because Drake is pop music and Kendrick Lamar has had one or two big songs. The other thing that's very different, and that's never been done before in rap history. So Drake is an anomaly in that regard, but then also this battle is an anomaly. Because, for instance, as big as Ja Rule or Biggie or Tupac or 50 Cent were, they were not moving units or nearly the pop superstar that Drake is and has been for a decade. The other main difference is that these disses from Kendrick Lamar in particular have been coming fast and furious, man. And that's also unprecedented because back in the day with the LL Cool J, Cool Mo D, the Ice Cube N.W.A, even really the Dr. Dre and Eazy-E, you'd have to wait months sometimes for songs to come out, maybe even up to a year, give or take, depending on what else was going on, or the rapper might say a little something and then really address it like a year later. And that obviously started changing with technology once you get into the early 2000s and some of these disses started coming faster. And with more venom, which I think really took a turn with Tupac with Hit 'Em Up. But the fact that Kendrick, is putting out so much material going out Drake in such a concentrated amount of time is unprecedented. Yes, we've seen some of these other disses, people putting out these other things quickly, but to have like that, to have Euphoria, to have 616 in LA, and then Meet the Grams all in around a month, but with three of those in particular, Euphoria, 616 in LA, and Meet the Grams to come out like almost consecutively is unprecedented, with really just Family Matters from Drake coming in to kind of put a little bump in the road, and then Kendrick responds with Meet the Grams. I mean, that's unprecedented and shows why this is a new wrinkle and an exciting time for listening to these disses, because to come out with Meet the Grams about an hour or less than an hour, depending on who you look at, Family Matters from Drake, Kendrick's going at Drake's son Adonis. He's going at Drake's mother, Sandra Graham. He's going at Baby Girl, Drake's daughter, and then Drake himself, of course. So, you know, that's a remarkable feat. I read, of course, some people said that Kendrick Lamar actually had one long song and then he broke it into three parts. Whether or not that's true, we'll never know. But regardless, the way that we received it takes things to a new, different dimension. And then, of course, the other thing that makes this diss very different from the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000 disses that we saw is the social media piling on. It's one thing from the fans, and one thing in particular I thought was amazing. I didn't do all the fact checking because I just thought it was hilarious, whether it's true or not, is all the things that allegedly happened at 616 in LA. That one I thought was particularly hilarious and mind blowing if they happen to be true. But the fact that other celebrities who are not directly involved in this beef are chiming in really takes this Drake Kendrick Lamar beef in another direction. Because since the 80s, of course, fans on the streets, uh, in whatever type of setting, would definitely comment on things. But now that we have the internet, and this has been going on for a long time now, but the fans' opinion matters more than, I would argue, ever. Because when things were done more in a vacuum in the LL Cool J Kumo D era back in the 80s and early 90s, and even with Ice Cube N.W.A, yeah, there was a perception or even a reality of who won, quote unquote. But that was more in the minds of people, and you heard about things like, you didn't know if, I live in the Los Angeles area now, I wouldn't necessarily know what someone in Tennessee thought. Whereas now you can find that out instantly. You can find out if you're in Arkansas what somebody in Idaho thinks. And that wasn't the case back in the day, unless it was someone writing in a letter to the editor to the source or to one of the rap magazines, and then they happen to print it, which was rare because the stuff moves fast. But I saw a post by Ninth Wonder. He says, "How are you going to make one diss record to set up Easter eggs for the next diss record?" This guy Marvel movie in his diss records, referring to what Kendrick Lamar was doing with Drake, which is, crazy because Ninth Wonder, obviously a big prominent producer, and has videos circulating, resurfacing with Drake and and Drake bigging him up and stuff. But the point is, we would have never known in the 80s, 90s, and maybe the 2000s even, uh, what someone like Ninth Wonder, who wasn't directly involved in this and isn't in either one of those camps, what they would have thought, because that just wasn't really something we had access to. And ironically, one of the biggest parts of all this, Suge Knight, who was directly and indirectly involved with a lot of the beefs that I referenced at the top of this, he even said something on Twitter. The best rappers to ever go at it was Pac versus Biggie, Nas versus Jay-Z, Cube versus N.W.A, 50 versus Ja Rule in Game. It's a man's world, but it ain't shit without a bitch. I'm out. Whoop. Now, the thing is, again, Suge is incarcerated, but Suge was involved in some of these big beefs, some of which he mentioned, and others, of course, that he didn't. But the reality is, we got incarcerated record executives commenting, we got producers not involved with the beef, and we got this happening in real time. So all of this makes this beef and this evolution of what's going on in these beefs so remarkable because it's relatively unprecedented. Uh, for the three main reasons I mentioned. One, we've never had an artist of the magnitude of Drake involved in dissing a super revered Pulitzer Prize winning, virtually universally acclaimed artist as we have with Kendrick Lamar. We haven't had the speed and the volume of content coming out as we're getting from Kendrick Lamar now. And then the social media thing, both from the fans and then from the rap world A-listers commenting on all this. So that all makes things very interesting and very different than anything we've seen before. That's my opinion. As always, hit us up in the comment section. Let us know what you think on this beef. What you're riding to. Are you caring about it? Are you listening to these songs? What does it mean to you? That's what I think. You can hit me on all social media at Soren Baker. Please follow me. Definitely subscribe, like, and join Unique Access Entertainment if you haven't already. And I'll catch you next time.